The world you perceive is less solid than you assume. It bends to the reach of your awareness. This audio script reveals an age-old truth. Reality is not something happening to you, it is something responding to you. As you hear these words, you will discover how to access this covert force and shape your life with clarity. The key has always been within you. Now is the moment to wake to it. Deep in the currents of time, a sacred thread of knowing has flowed through the minds of those who dared to question existence itself. This wisdom, handed down through generations of seers and contemplatives, exposes a simple yet profound fact. The cosmos operates by precise spiritual principles that govern everything that unfolds. You are now standing at the doorway of a revelation. The mere fact these sentences have reached you signals an intelligence that transcends mere chance. In this instant you have been invited to awaken to a power you have carried all along, patiently waiting to be acknowledged. What lies ahead is not merely knowledge but a transformation. These lines carry the distilled essence of universal truth, refined across centuries of inner practice. As you move through them, you will see that every condition in your life, every joy and every hardship, has emerged from an invisible realm of thought and energetic pattern. The principle you are about to meet goes beyond simple goal setting. It explains how the fabric of existence responds to your deepest beliefs, your perceptions, and the vibrations you emit. It is the mechanism behind what many call destiny, a force you have been unconsciously applying since the moment you were born. Signs of it have always been present, whispering in the language of synchronicity and intuitive nudges, those uncanny coincidences, those perfect timings that felt too orderly to be accidental. Those were glimpses of a greater order. Now you are poised to draw back the veil and view existence as it truly is. This knowledge brings responsibility. Once you recognize the laws shaping reality, you cannot remain hidden in ignorance. You become aware of your role as a creator, as the architect of experience. The path ahead will challenge your assumptions about what is real. Trust that you were drawn to these words because something within you recognized their truth. In a quiet London street where time seemed to keep company with the steady ticks of countless clocks, a watchmaker named Elliot lived a life of craftsmanship and certainty. Every gear, every spring, obeyed rules that felt unbreakable. Then, as autumn leaves turned, the seams of his world began to loosen. First it was a brass pocket watch on his bench, one he distinctly recalled repairing the day before. Yet now it lay broken as if his work had never been done. His apprentice swore the watch had just arrived. Soon after, a cafe where Elliot had eaten for 15 years appeared as a bookshop to everyone else, and according to common memory, it had always been a bookshop. As his certainties crumbled, a larger truth emerged. Reality was not a rigid monolith but more like water, reshaping itself to the contours of the consciousness that contained it. Decades later, in Hollywood's glittering haze, Eleanor Davis stood before her mirror, hands trembling with resolve. For years she had been one among many, another hopeful face lost in the swell of aspiring artists. On a certain morning something inside her shifted. She looked and saw not the present but the possibility that already lived in her heart. "I am a star," she breathed, not as a plea but as a recognition. From that moment she lived in the certainty of it, moving with the grace and confidence of one who had already succeeded. Small decisions, a posture held, a tone of voice chosen, all aligned with that inner knowing. Within months, circumstances began to mirror that inner state. A chance meeting at a diner led to an audition. A small role drew the attention of a director. and by the year's end her name was on many lips. Not by luck, not by random favor, but because her transformed consciousness called forth matching experience. These stories illuminate an ageless truth. What you see as fixed reality is a mirror of your inner state. The world you encounter is responsive, alive, and waiting for your direction. Reality is not something that merely happens to you. It is answering the tone of your being. Begin by selecting one small element of your daily life you wish to transform, perhaps how people react to you, or the flow of your morning. 7 days hold an unwavering sense that this element is already different, not hoping, not wishing, but knowing. Carry that knowing as naturally as you know the sun will rise. Observe how the outer world begins to respond to this new awareness. Note every shift and every synchronicity, however small, because in those subtleties you will witness the pliability of existence. In a busy newsroom in Chicago, amid the clatter of typewriters and the haze of cigarette smoke, a reporter first glimpsed the hidden architecture behind events. A headline he penned about a bridge rose above the river, and 3 days later those exact words surfaced in a conversation he overheard on a train. Such repetitions could be dismissed as coincidence, and at first they were. Yet patterns continued to appear. Reality speaks in echoes. Thoughts, words, and actions create ripples that repeat across time. In a suburban kitchen, a homemaker found herself dancing to a neighbor's radio, and within days unexpected blessings arrived: a check, a promotion. Moments of pure joy preceded gifts, and she discovered that surrendering to joy unlocked abundance. This is no accident. It is a cosmic pattern. Reality moves through recognizable, repeatable structures, from the spiral of galaxies to the unfurling of a fern, from seasons to the rhythm of your day. Become a detective of your own life. For a few days keep a journal of every time the outer world reflects your inner state. Record the thoughts you held upon waking and the events that followed. Notice recurring themes, repeating numbers, and mirrored situations. This practice is not mere observation, it is an initiation into the universe's language. As you decode these patterns, you will learn to compose the symphony of your life, directing how reality arranges itself in response to your conscious intention. In a dim jazz club, a musician's fingers danced over ivory night after night, yet the room remained indifferent. He had mastered his craft, but not the most vital instrument, his own inner state. He carried a sense of unworthiness that the room simply reflected back. One evening he changed something before he played. He allowed himself to feel worthy, to be an artist who deserved reverence. He did not merely think the thought, he embodied it. The music was the same, yet the response shifted dramatically. Silence fell, eyes softened, and appreciation flowed. A poet in another city did the same. Standing before a mirror and declaring herself the voice of a generation, she altered the consciousness behind her words. Publishers who once ignored her now sought her work. The world responds not to your actions alone, but to the identity you hold inside. Change the identity, and the world rearranges accordingly. Treated with the same awareness, your waking life is as malleable as a lucid dream. An Air Force pilot once realized mid-flight that he was awake within a dream and found he could direct events by intention. Others learned to treat each waking moment as if it were dreamlike, assuming impossibilities were natural, and watched circumstances bend to that new assumption. Life is not happening to you. It is responding to your level of awareness. Pause through the day and conduct reality checks. Choose something you have deemed impossible for now, assume it natural, and observe as your world begins to conform to this new assumption. You are not probing reality. You are remembering your authorship. In a small clock shop, a moment of choice revealed that reality branches like a tree rather than flowing in a single line. Every decision is a selection among infinite possible outcomes. One woman, after a profound loss, chose to see her future as a grand new adventure rather than a life defined by grief. Almost immediately opportunities surfaced that had previously been invisible. Your power lies not in hoping for an outcome but in consciously selecting the branch you will inhabit. Practice making small, deliberate selections throughout your day, before entering a room, before a call, and notice how reality aligns with your chosen path. The present moment is the field where all potential converges. When a financier stripped of his plans found himself with nowhere to chase, his attention settled into the taste of coffee, the sound of footsteps, the light in his office. As his awareness moved into now, synchronistic solutions appeared. A seamstress discovered that total presence made labor flow and clients arrive exactly when needed. The now is not a brief point between past and future. It is the seat of power where transformations occur instantly. Bring full attention to daily tasks and watch how time flexes, how synchronicities multiply, and how doors open without forced effort. The sensation of time stretching or collapsing is not an external law but a reflection of how you place your attention. In a small repair room, a watchmaker noticed that when he concentrated fully, hours shortened into minutes and work that normally dragged seemed to flow. When his mind wandered into memories, the present widened and became malleable. This observation reveals a vital truth. Past, present, and future are not fixed points marching in a straight line. They coexist, interwoven, influencing each other in ways the rational mind resists. By changing your perception of any moment, you ripple that change across your entire timeline. One woman revisited an old painful memory and deliberately reimagined it not as it happened, but as she would have wished it to be. As she held the new version in consciousness, new memories arose with equal clarity, and her present relationships softened and realigned. The future rearranged itself to fit the newly framed past. This does not erase history. It shifts the weight and meaning you attach to moments, and reality restructures to reflect that inner truth. Time is a sphere of possibilities, and your mind navigates that sphere. Altering how you hold one point reshapes the whole. This is the craft of timeline work. Belief is the engine behind what manifests. A musician played with a bitterness that confirmed his expectation of rejection. His audience reflected that conviction. When he encountered a stranger who said, "The world is not against you, it is simply agreeing with you," he realized that his deepest assumptions had been instructing reality. He turned that instruction inward and rewired his expectations. By adopting a new belief that his music mattered, his career transformed. Another woman, gripped by grief and convinced life had ended, chose instead to believe life was conspiring in her favor. Small acts and unexpected kindnesses began to appear, and her life shifted dramatically. There are no miracles here, only the obvious consequence that outer life must conform to inner conviction. Most people attempt to change conditions while holding unchanged the thoughts that created them. This is why so many remain trapped. To change form, you must change the underlying belief. Begin by identifying a core assumption that shapes your experience about money, love, or health, and intentionally hold its opposite for several days. Note how people respond differently, and how the fabric of your days alters in subtle yet undeniable ways. The universe is not a cold mechanism, it is a responsive presence. A man noticed repeating numbers and phrases that appeared across invoices, conversations, and pages of text. As these synchronicities multiplied, he realized something profound. The universe was dialoguing with him. Another worker at a switchboard learned to dial into guidance and receive answers through overheard talk, random pages falling open, or chance encounters. Each coincidence is a calibrated response, not a random quirk. The universe is alive with intelligence, and it answers the tone of your attention. Practice by requesting a sign before sleep, a color, a phrase, a small event, and then release attachment to how it arrives. Stay gently aware the next day and record each occurrence. Note not only what appears but the feeling that surfaces when recognition dawns. These recorded signs are threads in a living conversation between your consciousness and the wider intelligence that seeks to assist you. Through such attention you strengthen the bridge that translates inner signals into outer guidance. Awakening sometimes begins when dreams bleed into the waking world. A man came from a dream where he both designed and conducted a railway, bending tracks with thought. Instead of dismissing such a vision, he observed his waking day with the same creative curiosity and noticed expectations preceded events. Another woman started treating each waking moment as if it were dreamlike, where possibility was the default. When she assumed the posture of a head librarian before it existed, doors opened and events aligned with that identity. The distinction between dreaming and waking dissolves when you realize that each moment is ripe with potential and that your awareness can author which potentials unfold. Becoming the conscious author of your life means revising the script in places you once thought immutable. Choose an area that feels fixed and draft a new scene in detail. Breathe and speak it as truth, and then live as if that scene is already playing. You will notice the world rearranging to support the narrative you now carry. This is not imagination, it is the practice of conscious authorship. Vibration underlies appearance. A radio repairer learned that slight adjustments brought clarity to a noisy reception. He recognized that every thought and emotion emits a frequency and that life responds to the dominant frequency you hold. A pianist who shifted from melancholic to uplifting tunes saw the room change from disorderly to receptive. What resonates within will find matching forms without. Start a day by choosing a vibration to inhabit, joy, peace, abundance, and maintain it deliberately. When lower tones creep in, retune your attention until clarity returns. Keep a record of how people and circumstances respond to your altered frequency. What you focus on expands. Early quantum experiments showed that observation influences behavior at the smallest scales. In everyday life, this translates to a simple rule: attention creates. A teacher who stopped cataloging lack in her classroom and instead noticed light patterns and student generosity found donations and help arriving. Select 3 challenges to experiment with and shift your attention to the hidden possibilities in each. Observe and document the changes. When you train your gaze toward what can grow instead of what is missing, the universe concedes to the image you develop. Identity is the mechanism by which reality organizes itself. A struggling inventor kept failing until an elder told him, "You create nothing new because you remain the same old self." When he decided to become a different person, his results followed. A dressmaker began behaving as if already celebrated, and within weeks wealthy clients appeared. This is not role-playing but becoming. Choose an area to transform and embody the identity that already reflects the life you desire. Move, speak, and decide as that person would. Reality responds by rearranging circumstances to match who you are being. Assumption is law. A shopkeeper who assumed abundance began treating his modest store as a fine establishment and attracted a clientele that matched that assumption. A florist who assumed love was abundant shifted the way she engaged customers, and soon a deep relationship blossomed. Assumptions are not idle thoughts. They are the architecture that forces outcomes into being. Take a week to expose the assumptions holding your life in place, and then hold new ones with quiet certainty. Live from them and allow the outer world to realign. Time can be collapsed by aligning with a future self. A writer who refused to wait began writing as if already accomplished. His voice changed and publishers noticed. A nurse visualized herself healed and moved in ways that accelerated recovery. The future you desire exists now as a potential reality. Inhabit it, feel it, let that future inform your present choices. Act in ways your future self would, and watch the timeline compress so that what once felt distant begins to manifest rapidly. Pursuing too hard often repels. A salesman found that surrendering his frantic chase and focusing on service brought multiplied results. A widow searching desperately for love discovered that releasing the chase created space for unexpected, more fitting relationships. Paradox is central. The more you clutch, the more you push away. Learn to loosen the grip and allow life to flow. Make a practice of surrendering a contested outcome for a period, and observe how circumstances begin to move toward you with a different quality of grace. Obstacles are raw material for transmutation. Pressure that seems punitive can be the very force that catalyzes metamorphosis. A miner who saw coal as potential diamond began to use hardship as fuel for creative solutions and rose to lead innovations in his field. An artist turned rejection letters into mixed media works that found acclaim. Encounter difficulty as concentrated energy ready for alchemy. Ask what form this pressure could take if redirected, and then act with that new frame. The obstacle will begin to reveal its hidden dividends. Parallel realities wait to be activated by decision. A farmer who waited for perfect weather watched another plant boldly and reap abundance. Action shapes conditions. Decisive choices collapse possibilities into the reality you choose. Pick an area where you have been hesitating and make a committed decision today. Take one tangible step that signals the universe you have chosen this path. When you truly decide, circumstances begin to bend in support as if they had been waiting for your command. Final mental chains are self-created. A prison guard observed that the staff were as confined by belief as the inmates by iron. A factory worker who decided her limits were optional walked into a bank that had felt off-limits and began building a company. Freedom is a recognition. The walls existed in thought. Identify the last limiting belief you hold. Act for a day as if it never existed and take one action that your old self would have called impossible. This practice dissolves the boundary between what you believed and what you can now claim. Activation is instantaneous when you commit fully. A telegraph operator received a message that his thoughts were shaping events in real time and then saw evidence moments later. A bookseller changed her sense of identity overnight, and the next morning a reporter featured her shop, leading to immediate requests to host groups. When you shift frequency and embody a new state fully, the world begins to reconfigure instantly. Make an absolute decision about one aspect of your life and live it now. You are always transmitting. The question is whether you transmit with awareness. Flow is the art of moving with the intelligence that organizes events. A train conductor diverted a route and discovered that every delay carved a path for meaningful outcomes. A performer who surrendered to a moment of malfunction produced a performance of rare authenticity. When you stop forcing the course and tune to the current of synchronicity, life orchestrates itself with far greater finesse. Experiment by releasing rigid plans for a day and following intuitive nudges. Notice how the quality of events shifts. Non-resistance accelerates everything. A boxer learned to use the opponent's force. A seamstress ceased fighting finances and instead flowed with them, resulting in opportunities previously unseen. Resistance strengthens what you oppose. Embrace what is and allow energy to redirect. In surrender, the grip loosens and doors open. Living as your future self now creates an infinite loop of manifestation. When a craftsman began behaving as the awarded designer he envisioned, the world responded with openings and recognition. A writer who stopped introducing herself as a typist and began living as a novelist changed the trajectory of her career almost overnight. Choose the version of you who has already arrived and act from that place. The timeline you intend will reciprocate. Test reality in real time by shifting a state within and watching the external mirror respond. A magician's trick teaches that attention directs perception. When the performer embodied mastery, audiences saw nothing else. An independent designer adopted a state of certainty, and the same industry professionals who previously dismissed her began to value her work. For a set period, embody a chosen state fully, and let your surroundings prove the principle. Co-creation is not passive. In a chess club, a master saw the end before the first move and created it. A botanist treated plants as collaborative partners rather than objects, and the responses were unprecedented. Decide how you want a situation to unfold and live from the perspective that you have already orchestrated that outcome. Move through your day as the grandmaster of your life and watch how the pieces align. The world you perceive is the material expression of your consciousness made visible. No more techniques are required beyond the steady practice of being. Your presence alone shapes the field. Step into the role of conscious creator and act with the certainty that your life is happening through you. You are the lighthouse. Existence naturally aligns with your radiance. This is where true living begins. The experience of reality responding to your inner state continues to deepen as you practice. Notice how subtle shifts in feeling precede alterations in circumstance. Small decisions made from a revised inner posture ripple outward. When you begin to treat each moment as a canvas for deliberate creation, ordinary events take on new meaning and previously invisible possibilities surface. This is not mystical speculation. It is practical evidence gathered from lives that changed when their occupants altered the way they related to thought, feeling, and attention. Consider the ways language shapes experience. Words are not neutral labels. They are instruments that tune your consciousness to particular frequencies. When a person removes the qualifier from a desire and states it as an identity, I am generous, I am capable, I am creative, the nervous system reorganizes. Posture, breath, and micro-choices follow the declaration. Others respond differently because your presence carries a different charge. An entrepreneur who shifted from saying "I hope my business succeeds" to "I run a thriving enterprise" found new collaborators, invitations, and clients appearing as if the ecosystem had been waiting for the cue. The outer world is always sensitive to the tonal keys you play. Change the phraseology and you change the ecology of response. Emotion is the amplifying engine of manifestation. Thoughts provide form, emotions provide volume. A scientist of the inner life once observed that when feeling and thought align, the field of attention coheres and attracts matching patterns with surprising speed. When you imagine an outcome with detached curiosity, the world may move slowly. When you imagine the same outcome with heartfelt excitement, gratitude, and a visceral sense of having already arrived, the field quickens. This is why rituals that combine clear intention with embodied feeling, breathing into the imagined scene, smiling as if it is true, moving the body in ways the future self would, produce disproportionate results. Practice feeling the inner state fully, and allow emotion to amplify the signal you transmit. Surrender and deliberate action are not opposites. They are complementary forces. Some misread surrender as passivity, but true surrender is an active acceptance that includes clear intention and wise movement. A farmer planting without expectation, yet attending the soil with practical care, is surrender in action. A designer who lets go of frantic pushing while still improving her portfolio and contacting galleries is combining non-resistance with purposeful work. The paradox is that the more you hold rigidly to an outcome, the more you create friction. Loosen your grip, bring clarity to intention, and move in the direction indicated by intuition. The outcome often arrives with greater ease and in forms richer than you could have engineered through force alone. Attention is the currency you spend. Be selective. Each moment you invest attention in a worry or complaint, you reinforce that pattern and invite additional evidence. If you habitually scrutinize scarcity, the world obliges with corroborating data. Instead, practice pivoting attention toward what is working, even the tiniest seed of possibility, and you will feed growth. This is not about denying pain or ignoring practical problems. It is about allocating your creative capital where it yields the highest return. A shopkeeper who shifted from tallying empty shelves to celebrating each satisfied customer found suppliers and energetic help arriving in unexpected ways. Attention acts like sunlight. Where you direct it, life unfolds. Rituals accelerate rewiring. Humans are built for repetition. Neural pathways strengthen through repeated practice. Design short daily actions that anchor new states. 3 breaths into gratitude, a 5-minute scene of future life, a conscious posture of confidence before an important meeting. These miniature ceremonies prime the nervous system and steadily build the inner architecture required for sustained change. Rituals need not be elaborate. Their potency lies in continuity and feeling. Over time, they become the scaffolding upon which a new identity is built. Relationships are mirrors and portals. Others often reflect back the identity you have adopted, and they also provide access to new realities. When you shift your inner frequency, notice who begins to show up, who withdraws, and who changes their tone toward you. Sometimes relationships realign to match the new you. Other times they reveal unresolved patterns that still need attention. The wise approach is to honor the unfolding, nurture connections that resonate, and gently release those that do not. In doing so, you create social landscapes that support who you are becoming. The mind's stories influence the landscape of possibility. Narratives we tell ourselves about who we are, what we deserve, and what the future holds act as templates for the field to follow. Rewriting these narratives is not fantasy. It is the work of reauthoring the software of your life. Choose new stories that are believable enough to carry emotional weight, yet expansive enough to rest beyond the limit of current facts. Practice living into these stories until memory yields and new evidence accumulates. A teacher who decided she was an inspiring guide began preparing lessons with renewed care and curiosity. Students responded with engagement, and her reputation transformed accordingly. Practice noticing synchronicities as feedback rather than flukes. Small convergences, an article that lands in your lap that answers a question you were pondering, a phone call from someone who mentions exactly what you need, are data points about the alignment between your inner posture and outer circumstances. Record them. As patterns appear, you will gain confidence in reading the language of emergence. This confidence is a stabilizing force. It reduces anxiety and increases clarity about which moves to make next. Embodied presence matters. Many approaches to manifestation emphasize visualization and thought. Embodiment completes the circuit. Posture, breath, micro-expressions, and gait carry information that others perceive before words are spoken. Stand as the person you intend to be, shoulders relaxed, breath steady, voice clear. These somatic cues inform your physiology and signal the field. Small body adjustments can catalyze shifts in mood and attract matching conditions. Integrate short somatic resets into your day. Breathe, align, and step from that grounded center. Learn to work with resistance as information. When you feel blockage, procrastination, friction, confusion, do not assume failure. Ask what the resistance is pointing to. Resistance can indicate a misalignment between surface intention and deeper desire, a fear that needs revising, or a practical blind spot that requires new learning. Name the resistance, thank it for its message, and then design a corrective action. Sometimes the corrective is rest or reorientation. Sometimes it is a small forward motion to cultivate momentum. Treat resistance as a compass that refines your course rather than a wall that stops you. Practice micro-commitments. Grand declarations are useful for orienting your life, but large aims can overwhelm the nervous system. Break goals into manageable actions that build confidence through completion. A writer aiming to publish a book may commit to 50 words a day. A small habit, consistently executed, compounds powerfully. These micro-commitments anchor you in evidence, proof that you can follow through, and expand your capacity for larger choices. Wealth, like other aspects of life, responds to vibration and identity. Scarcity thinking tightens behavior and limits visibility to opportunities. Abundance thinking loosens the nervous system and expands perception of possible pathways. This does not mean ignoring financial realities. It means working with both practical planning and inner states. Cultivate an attitude of resourcefulness combined with clear accounting and prudent action. Let gratitude for existing resources generate the emotional environment where greater resources can be perceived and mobilized. Health and vitality are similarly responsive. The body listens to belief, to stress level, to the quality of attention. When someone shifts from identifying as chronically unwell to describing themselves as healing, and taking small daily actions in alignment with that identity, physiology often follows. This is not a denial of medicine or needed interventions. It is a complementary approach where inner orientation supports physical recovery. Respect medical guidance while also applying coherent attention and consistent supportive habits that amplify resilience. Use language of possibility when you speak to others and to yourself. The verbs you choose create directional force. Say I will explore, I will learn, I will choose instead of I cannot, I must, or I am stuck. This subtle shift opens neural pathways associated with curiosity and adaptive action. When you talk to others from possibility, you invite collaboration and imaginative response. When you speak to yourself from possibility, you mobilize latent capability. Practice gratitude not as an obligatory list but as an embodied stance. Gratitude reshapes attention, pulling it toward what is already present, and thereby expands the field of reception. Rather than mechanical gratitude, cultivate a felt appreciation that lingers in the body. Let it be the baseline from which you act. When gratitude becomes your default tone, transitions that once felt hard become smoother, and the world begins to supply confirmatory responses more readily. Notice how small acts of generosity alter social fields. Giving without expectation changes the energetic currency of interactions and often creates cycles of reciprocity that are surprising and enriching. Generosity need not be grand. It may be a patient ear, a thoughtful note, a small service. Ritualize small contributions and observe how the social world rewires to your benefit. Anchor learning in reflection. After each day, spend moments recording outcomes that matched your intentions and those that did not. Ask what felt aligned and what did not. These reflections refine your calibration and inform incremental shifts. Over weeks, patterns emerge that accelerate your capacity to select realities that serve you. Embrace playful experimentation. Approach these practices as scientific exploration rather than sacral obligation. Make hypotheses, choose an inner state, set a small ritual, predict an outcome, and then measure. Learn from results, adjust, and repeat. A playful stance reduces fear and increases creativity, making it easier to sustain growth. Recognize that evolution is iterative. Sudden awakenings occur, but lasting transformation is built through daily fidelity to new ways of being. Trust the process. Small, consistent changes compound into radical reformation over time. Your attention is a tool of creation. Your language, emotion, and embodied posture are the levers. Rituals, reflection, and small commitments are the scaffolding. Relationships and generosity are the social mechanisms that amplify your reach. Through these means, you can intentionally guide the fabric of experience to mirror the life you choose to inhabit. As you continue this practice, the world's responsiveness becomes more obvious and consistent. Small inner adjustments that once felt insignificant begin to trigger clear shifts in circumstances. The change is rarely spectacular at first. It arrives as a sequence of micro-pleasures and soft confirmations that accumulate into undeniable momentum. You will notice doors opening slightly wider, conversations tilting in helpful directions, and opportunities arriving with a coherence that feels like conversation rather than chance. This cumulative evidence is the engine of confidence. It allows you to rely less on hope and more on skillful cultivation of your inner field. Language sculpts reality more precisely than most imagine. The phrases you choose to describe yourself are not idle metaphors. They are programming directives that organize attention, posture, and action. When you shift from tentative language, such as maybe or someday, into declarative present tense identity statements, the physiology follows. Your voice, breathing patterns, and bearing reconfigure to embody the new script. Others sense that shift before you speak and respond in kind. The entrepreneur who changed her internal sentence from "I wish" to "I am" created an energetic signature that attracted collaborators and clients who matched the new claim. Practice speaking about your life as if the direction has already been activated, and observe how the world conforms. Your emotional tone functions as the amplifier of intention. Clarity of thought sets the pattern. Feeling supplies the acceleration. Imagine two people who hold the identical image of success. One feels lukewarm interest, the other radiates gratitude and vivid excitement. The latter's field organizes around that charge with greater speed. Rituals that marry clear intention with embodied feeling dramatically shorten the distance between inner aim and outer fulfillment. Breathe into your image, let the body soften into gratitude, and carry the sensation as though the outcome were already woven into your present. These practices reorient the nervous system and broadcast a steady signal that the wider field can easily register and answer. Effective surrender is not passive resignation, it is energetic clarity coupled with wise motion. Surrender means refusing the tug-of-war between desire and control. It means making a deliberate choice, then releasing obsessive micromanagement while continuing to act in alignment with your decision. The farmer who plants with both practical care and no rigid attachment to a particular timing is exercising mastery. The artist who refines work daily without forcing outcomes demonstrates the same balance. Learn to tell the difference between productive engagement and anxious clutching, and choose the path that conserves energy while staying true to intention. Attention is the currency through which you shape probability. Wherever you spend your focus, you fund the outcome. If your days are dominated by cataloging problems, you build a life that aligns with their story. If you intentionally allocate attention to what is growing, even the smallest sign, you compound that pattern. This does not deny responsibility for solving problems. It simply asks you to invest more creative capital into possibility and practical solutions than into rumination. The shopkeeper who celebrated every sale rather than tallying loss soon found suppliers and helpers arriving because his attention had attracted them. Human beings are ritual machines. The nervous system prefers repetition. Establish concise, emotionally resonant practices that anchor new identities. 3 breaths of gratitude upon waking, a brief scene of your future life before sleep, and a posture of confident presence before important engagements will shape neural pathways faster than sporadic grand intentions. Rituals need not be elaborate. Their strength lies in consistent feeling and repetition. Over time, these small acts form a new baseline from which choices naturally spring. Other people are mirrors and accelerants. As you change your inner state, notice who begins to appear, who shifts in tone toward you, and which relationships recalibrate or recede. Often what departs is not loss but liberation from patterns no longer aligned with your evolving frequency. Nurture connections that resonate with your new authoring, and gently release those that do not. The social landscape will gradually reflect your inner standard. In this way, relationships serve as both feedback and doorway to fresh realities. The narratives you tell yourself are templates for the field. Narratives about limitation or identity act as software that runs your daily experience. Rewriting them is practical work. Select new stories that feel believable enough to carry emotion and yet expansive enough to invite unfamiliar evidence. Live into these stories with small actions that corroborate them. A teacher who adopted the story, "I inspire students," found herself preparing and delivering lessons differently. Students responded, and the story became self-fulfilling. Over time, these reauthored narratives shift the data your life presents. Synchronistic events function as intelligent feedback. Pay attention to the seemingly small coincidences that answer a question you did not voice or present a resource precisely when you need it. They are signals that you are in alignment. Keep records of these convergences. As the list grows, your trust in this responsiveness deepens. Trust is the substrate of bold action because it reduces fear and clarifies which steps to take next. Embodiment completes the circuit between thought and manifestation. Visualization and planning are useful, but without bodily congruence the signal is weak. Posture, breath, micro-expressions, and movement carry information the brain shares before words. Adjust these somatic markers to match the state you intend to inhabit. Stand tall, breathe clearly, speak from a centered chest. The small shifts in body language rewire feeling and inform others of your new density, prompting a concordant external response. Resistance is information, not condemnation. When you encounter friction, procrastination, doubt, fatigue, invite curiosity about its source. Ask whether this resistance points to fear, a misaligned value, missing skill, or a need for rest. Sometimes resistance signals that the goal requires a new approach. Other times it points to deeper change required in your identity. Name what arises, welcome its message, and then design corrective actions, which may include rest, learning, or micro-movements that generate momentum. Treat resistance as a diagnostic that improves strategy. Micro-commitments build durable momentum. Grand proclamations help orient, but the nervous system expands through small wins. Choose tiny, achievable steps that create repetitive evidence of competence. Write 50 words daily, make one meaningful connection weekly, or set aside a short focused block for practice. These small actions, faithfully executed, compound into large-scale shifts. They create the internal proof that you can follow through, which in turn supports larger daring. Abundance is both practical management and inner stance. Scarcity-focused thinking narrows perception and limits opportunity. Abundance orientation loosens the nervous system and expands the range of perceived possibilities. Practice pragmatic stewardship while cultivating emotional resourcefulness. Gratitude for what exists combined with clear planning primes you to see and move toward additional resources. Health responds to integrated care. The body knows trauma, belief, and attention. Adopting a healing identity while following sound medical guidance and consistent supportive habits often accelerates recovery and resilience. Attention to rest, nutrition, movement, and stress regulation pairs with inner orientation to amplify outcomes. The verbs you use matter. Say, "I will explore," "I will learn," "I will choose." These forms of language open neural pathways for curiosity and agency. Avoid rigid absolutes that close possibility and reduce action. When speaking with others from a place of exploration, you invite cooperative energy rather than defensive resistance. Graceful gratitude is not a checklist, it is a lingering tone felt in breath and posture. Cultivate a sense of appreciation that saturates the body. This baseline shifts perception and opens channels for supply. When gratitude becomes habitual, transitions become easier and confirmations arrive with greater regularity. Small acts of generosity change networks. Giving without expectation asymmetrically alters reciprocity and often generates surprising returns. Generosity need not be grand. A thoughtful note, an offered skill, or a patient listen reconfigures social dynamics and opens paths previously unseen. Anchor growth through nightly reflection. Record what matched intentions and what diverged. Ask what felt aligned and what did not. The practice of review refines calibration and accelerates learning. Over weeks, patterns reveal themselves and inform smarter choices. Experiment playfully and scientifically. Make hypotheses about shifting a state. Craft a short ritual. Predict an outcome, and then measure results. This playful stance reduces fear and invites curiosity, making it far easier to sustain disciplined practice. Consistent iteration produces deep change. Awakenings can be sudden, yet most durable transformation emerges from daily fidelity to new practices. Trust slow accumulation because it composes the foundation for radical change. Your awareness is the instrument that composes reality. Language, feeling, and body are the tools. Rituals and micro-agreements are the scaffolding. Relationships and generosity amplify reach. Through these means you can intentionally steer experience to align with the life you choose to inhabit. As you move deeper into these practices, you will notice a refinement in how reality answers you. The shifts become more precise, less noisy, and more reliably aligned with your intentions. What once felt like sporadic miracles now appears as an unfolding competence. You learn to order your inner life so that the outer world naturally follows. This competence is not a quick trick, but a cultivated skill, built through attentive repetition, honest reflection, and a willingness to revise small habits that no longer serve you. Consider the subtle power of tone and tempo in daily speech. The cadence with which you describe your plans carries information to your nervous system and to the field around you. When you speak hurriedly, clinging to outcomes with friction, you signal scarcity and urgency. Those tones attract matching turbulence. When you speak slowly, with clarity and steady breath, you create a field of calm competence that invites cooperation. Practice saying important things with a measured tone, allowing words to settle like stones into the world rather than splintering into anxious scatter. This small change often alters the dynamics of meetings, negotiations, and private conversations. Attention to morning routines matters more than most people expect. How you begin the day sets the tuning for hours to come. A brief set of practices that center the body and direct attention. Quiet breath, a single clear intention stated as a present tense identity, and a small physical gesture that anchors the declaration, creates an energetic scaffolding that informs decisions throughout the day. People who adopted such a ritual report feeling less reactive, more creative, and more effective. The routine is small, but its effect accumulates. The day becomes an extension of an inner state rather than a battleground of reactivity. Technology is useful when it supports presence. It is harmful when it fragments attention. Notice how reactive scrolling scatters focus and strengthens a nervous habit of distraction. If your aim is to create with more precision, establish boundaries around devices that fragment your awareness. Designate times for information intake and times for depth. Protect thinking spaces where you allow ideas to form without interruption. This structural discipline for attention preserves the subtle bandwidth you need to tune reality with intention. Financial decisions are best approached as dialogues between prudence and possibility. Balancing account books is a necessary discipline. At the same time, a cramped internal stance toward money limits visibility to opportunities. Cultivate a twofold practice: practical stewardship and an imagination that surveys possibilities. Make clear, conservative plans for resources while also asking curiosity-driven questions about potential pathways for growth. Keep a brief daily practice of noticing small flows of abundance, a small unexpected saving, an inexpensive solution, a helpful introduction, and let gratitude for these tiny gains widen your perception of options. Relationships transform through small shifts in interior tone. When you approach conversations from a place of genuine curiosity and generous listening, the field opens and people reveal resources and possibilities you might have missed. Practice asking one open question in each meaningful conversation and then truly listen without planning the reply. This posture not only enriches connection but also surfaces information that can alter the course of projects, collaborations, and friendships. The social world responds to the quality of presence you bring. In creative work, the balance between discipline and play is vital. Set modest constraints to generate momentum, time limits, small deliverables, daily minimums, then allow room for playful exploration within those boundaries. Constraints sharpen focus. Play invites novelty. Many artists and writers discover that their best work emerges when they respect a structure without stifling curiosity. Treat deadlines as creative scaffolds rather than punitive cages. Use the container of narrative to organize your days. Short story-like frames orient experience. Begin the day with a one-sentence scene for how you want to move through it. Clear, connected, productive, and close the day with a brief note on how the scene unfolded. Over time, these daily micro-stories accrete into a larger arc that you can influence. Narrative gives meaning to events and helps you notice opportunities that align with your chosen storyline. Learn to work with your energy cycles. Each person has natural peaks and troughs of vigor and clarity. Schedule demanding cognitive tasks during your peaks and restorative or routine activities during lower energy windows. This alignment reduces friction and increases productivity without strain. Noticing your cycles and honoring them is a practical expression of self-honesty that respects the physiology behind creative output. The architecture of your physical environment influences inner states. Small changes, decluttering a workspace, inviting natural light, adding a living plant, or designating a corner for uninterrupted focus, alter how you move through tasks. Your environment can either support the states you wish to embody or undermine them. Curate your surroundings with the same intentionality you apply to mental practices. Practice conversational rehearsals for important exchanges. Imagine the meeting. Adopt the identity of the person who is already calm and persuasive, and rehearse the tone you wish to carry. This rehearsal is not manipulation. It is preparation that aligns posture, breath, and intention. When you sit down, your body already knows how to move, and the interaction flows more naturally toward the outcome you intend. Notice the small proofs of alignment and let them inform your confidence. When a call arrives that answers a question you recently held, or a new contact mentions an idea that solves a problem you were wrestling with, register the event as confirmation. Collecting these proofs strengthens trust in your ability to call forth realities and reduces the need for frantic strategizing. Cultivate a monthly review practice. At month's end, reflect on what shifted, what patterns repeated, and what choices felt aligned. Note 3 decisions that led to growth and 3 habits that could be revised. These quarterly levels of reflection provide the perspective needed to recalibrate practices and to design new experiments with greater clarity. Over a year, these iterative cycles compound into systemic changes in identity and circumstance. Rest is part of the creative toolkit. High performance benefits from deliberate restoration, sleep, playful rest, nature time, and social downtime. These regenerative practices replenish your capacity to hold higher frequencies without burnout. Treat rest as an active strategy that sustains long-term creation rather than as indulgence. Learn to identify when control is productive and when it is counterproductive. Control applied to logistics, standards, and accountability produces reliable results. Control applied as anxiety, micromanagement, or rigid expectation binds energy and repels cooperation. When you notice the latter, practice a softening ritual. 3 breaths, a literal uncrossing of arms, and a brief acknowledgement to yourself that the outcome can arrive through multiple pathways. Practice small acts of courage regularly. Courage scales from tiny choices, speaking a necessary truth kindly, asking for a resource you need, or applying for an opportunity that intimidates you. These small acts strengthen the neural circuits associated with daring and widen the range of actions you feel available. Courage becomes a habit when practiced in low-stakes contexts before it is needed in high-stakes moments. Find a few trusted collaborators who can mirror your commitments. People who share an orientation toward conscious authorship create fertile fields for mutual support. Form short accountability pacts that honor both freedom and follow-through. Collaboration expands resource access and generates compound creativity beyond what any single person can sustain. Practice gratitude that is specific and sensory. Rather than listing abstract items, name precise instances: an unexpected compliment, the taste of tea, the way light fell on a meeting room, and feel the body's response. Sensory gratitude anchors the experience in physiology and shifts attention to the presence of abundance already at work. Ask better questions. Questions direct attention. Replace why me with what is opening. What can I learn? What small step aligns with my future self? Better questions produce better data, and better data informs more skillful moves. Questions like what would love do now, or what decision creates the most space, often reveal possibilities overlooked by anxious minds. Experiment with short fasts from complaining or negative predictions. Choose a day when you will notice complaining and consciously reframe it as a curiosity or a problem to solve. The discipline of shifting from complaint to constructive curiosity rewires conversational habits and reduces the frequency of low-vibration narratives in your social circle. Attend to small acts of integrity. Honoring small promises to yourself, showing up for 5 minutes of practice, sending a note you promised, returning a call, creates a lineage of trust between your present and future selves. Integrity is the currency the field recognizes. When you consistently deliver on small commitments, larger opportunities find you more trustworthy. Learn to celebrate intermediary wins. Too often people wait for the finish line to celebrate. Honoring intermediate milestones amplifies motivation and signals to the field that progress is real. Mark small victories with brief pauses, an acknowledgement, or a note in your journal. Practice a daily 5-minute pause to recalibrate. At midday, step out, breathe, tune into the sensation of presence. Notice one thing that is working and one thing you can do next. This brief reset interrupts reactive spirals and allows you to navigate the rest of the day from a clearer center. Use creative constraints to focus imagination. Choose a tight limit. Write a scene in 20 minutes. Design a product using only 3 materials. And notice how constraints force free creative solutions. Constraints create momentum by simplifying choice and channeling energy. The field of possibilities responds to steady, embodied signal more than to frantic variance. Choose practices that are sustainable and evolve them slowly. Grand explosions of effort may produce short-term gains but often lack the staying power that comes from consistent alignment. Keep a log of small synchronistic events and seeds. Review this log monthly to see the web of confirmations that prove the principles at work. As the list grows, you will find courage to lean into bolder directions. Shift language around identity from tentative to declarative. Align body with the new claim. Practice short rituals that anchor feeling, and iterate with a playful experimental attitude. These are the components of a practical, repeatable method for shaping experience. As your practice deepens, you will notice an increasing refinement in how the world mirrors your inner orientation. Subtle calibrations of mood, phrase, and posture begin to shape outcomes with greater precision. The early days feel like experiments. With time, those experiments become skillful habits. What once arrived as scattered confirmations now shows up as patterned response. Your capacity to steer experience grows not because external circumstances suddenly become easier, but because your inner instruments become more finely tuned. Small, consistent shifts in attention and feeling produce a far richer field of results than sporadic bursts of willpower. Consider how the imagination functions as a rehearsal studio for reality. When you vividly rehearse a scene, feeling the body, hearing the ambient sounds, and sensing the emotional texture, you provide your nervous system with a template it can embody. This embodiment changes micro-decisions across the day, from tone of voice to the timing of an email. A person who rehearses a calm, persuasive conversation finds that under pressure the body defaults to that rehearsal rather than panic. Rehearsals need not be long. Even a few mindful moments of detailed, embodied imagining before a meeting align subtle behavior and invite corresponding responses from others. Notice how your inner vocabulary directs energy. Words like I am and I have carry a different force than I wish or I hope. Statements that contain certainty create a nervous system alignment that supports consistent action. This is not about arrogance, it is about coherence. Choose phrasing that embodies the state you intend and let the body align to it. Speak to yourself with the dignity you intend to inhabit and watch how the world, in turn, treats the voice it hears. The practice of gratitude functions on 2 levels. It changes neurochemistry and it redirects perception. Gratitude floods the body with supportive hormones and simultaneously reorients attention toward available resources. When you practice feeling gratitude as a baseline, your mind becomes adept at spotting pathways and opportunities that previously went unnoticed. Gratitude is therefore both medicine and map. It soothes anxiety and reveals routes forward. Learn to distinguish between constructive fear and habitual story. Fear is useful when it prompts wise caution. It becomes limiting when it plays on a loop of imagined catastrophe. When fear arises, examine its message. Is there a practical step to take, new information to gather, or is this fear replaying an old narrative? Act on useful information, and for patterned story-based fear, apply the practice of gentle revision. Shift your inner narrative to a version that contains the growth you intend and take an appropriate micro-action to demonstrate new possibility. Cultivate the habit of short, frequent presence checks. Throughout your day, pause briefly, 3 breaths, and ask where your attention sits. Is it on lack, on future worry, on a small irritation? Then consciously relocate attention to one thing that is functioning, or to a next step you can do. These micro-resets cut the power of reactive loops and rebuild momentum. Over weeks, these tiny recalibrations become automatic and greatly increase your capacity to sustain higher frequencies for longer periods. Work with the rhythm of small wins. Design achievable micro-goals that provide immediate feedback. Write a paragraph, complete a sketch, make one helpful connection. Celebrate these micro-wins with a brief acknowledgement, an internal nod, a recorded note. This practice accumulates evidence of competence and feeds confidence, which in turn expands the range of actions you feel capable of taking. The social field is an amplifier. When you shift internally, the relationships around you either resonate or dissonate. Both responses are informative. Resonate indicates alignment and opportunity for deeper collaboration. Dissonance often highlights areas where your identity is evolving and certain patterns no longer fit. Honor the rearrangement. Sometimes releasing relationships is not a deficit, but a necessary clearing to make room for partnerships that match your new frequency. In parallel, cultivate new connections that embody the qualities you seek. People who practice presence, generosity, and accountability. Practice clarity around boundaries. Energy is conserved when boundaries are clear. Say yes to what aligns and no to distractions that scatter focus. Boundaries are not walls but channels that preserve bandwidth for what matters. Clear boundaries reduce reactive stress and protect the fragile concentration needed to tune reality with intent. Attend to the quality of questions you ask yourself. Questions direct neural attention. Ask those that widen perception. What is possible here? What small step would align me with my future self? Which action creates more space? These questions open pathways. They orient you toward solutions rather than entrenching problems. Refine your inner inquiry, and you will receive richer data from both your interior experience and external feedback. Use creative constraints to generate freedom. Limiting your options paradoxically releases imaginative problem-solving. Set short deadlines, restrict material choices, or define narrow themes for creative work. These constraints channel energy and often produce surprising breakthroughs because they force the mind to work within a focused field rather than diffuse into many directions. Practice the discipline of finishing. Incomplete projects leak energy and reduce the field's coherence. Prioritize completion of small tasks and allow them to close. Finished actions send clearer signals into the world than perpetually half-complete intentions. A completed article, a sent email, a finished proposal, all of these create closure and open new pathways. Lean into regular physical movement. The body stores emotional patterns. Movement dissolves stuck energy and allows new states to arise. Simple daily practices, a short walk, stretching, deliberate breathwork, keep circulation and mood responsive. Movement is a low-cost reset that integrates nervous system changes into embodied patterns. Nurture sensory richness. The senses are portals to presence. Allow moments of deep sensory attention, the taste of food, the texture of fabric, the smell of rain. These moments anchor you in now and strengthen the nervous system's ability to hold higher frequency states. Sensory attention is also a vehicle for creative insight because it opens channels often closed by habitual distraction. Embrace incremental audacity. Boldness need not be reckless. Small leaps taken repeatedly sum into daring transitions. Audition for one role, pitch one idea, apply for one scholarship. These actions are courageous precisely because they create new evidence. Over time, the accumulation of incremental audacity reconfigures your life geometry. Tend your inner ecology. Mental and emotional hygiene are as practical as physical hygiene. Clear habitual negative talk, reduce consumption of draining content, and curate influences that sustain the states you aim to hold. Protect your inner environment as deliberately as you would a physical living space. Practice short-term fasts from certainty. When rigid certainty arises that something must or must not be, experiment with holding curiosity instead. Curiosity is lighter and invites more options. The less you insist on a single path, the more the field can offer alternatives that you might not have imagined. Use language of inclusion rather than exclusion. Frame choices as what you will pursue instead of what you no longer will engage. This wording turns energy toward construction rather than negation. Telling yourself, "I will cultivate presence" shifts attention more powerfully than "I will stop being distracted." Learn to pause before key responses. When provoked or tempted to quick reaction, take a breath. This small delay creates space for wise action rather than habit. Many relational ruptures and missed opportunities resolve simply because the pause allows a more skillful answer to emerge. Work with cycles rather than against them. Creative energy ebbs and flows. Align major creative pushes with natural peaks, and schedule admin or restorative tasks for troughs. Honoring cycles reduces burnout and increases the sustainability of high-frequency living. Keep an evidence notebook. Document small synchronistic hits, decisions that led to desired outcomes, and times where presence changed the immediate field. This notebook becomes a moral and practical booster. On days of doubt, reread entries to remember that the field is responsive and that your work accumulates. Practice inviting feedback without defensiveness. When others offer perspectives, test their usefulness with curiosity rather than immediate rebuttal. Useful feedback emerges from channels you might otherwise dismiss. Humility combined with discretion accelerates learning. Rehearse compassion for yourself. Transformation often triggers internal friction. When you fall back into old habits, respond with curiosity and kindness rather than harsh judgment. Compassionate correction is far more effective than punitive self-talk. Integrate small acts of ritual that mark thresholds, starting a new project, concluding a relationship phase, or launching an endeavor. Ritual creates psychological punctuation that helps the brain recognize change and consolidate it. These rites can be brief but symbolically clear: a written note, a small offering, a moment of silent acknowledgement. Practice radical yet reasonable accountability. Set commitments you can realistically meet, and then honor them. If you fail, mark reasons without shame and adjust systems. Consistent integrity builds a track record the field recognizes and responds to. Tune your environment to support focus. Use light, sound, and physical arrangement to reduce friction. Small changes, an ergonomic chair, a lamp that mimics daylight, a whiteboard for immediate ideas, translate into measurable increases in creative output. Practice generosity with time and attention. Offering presence to others without expectation often precipitates reciprocal support. Time given with clarity and warmth often returns multiplied through collaborative opportunities and strengthened relationships. Recognize that mastery is an accumulation of disciplined acts, not a single hero moment. Approach each day as an opportunity to refine instincts, to test questions, and to collect evidence. Over months and years, these small acts cohere into a life whose outer shape elegantly matches its inner quality. As your practice becomes more integrated, you will notice a refinement in how the world replies to you. Responses become subtler yet more dependable, and the noise of random coincidence gives way to a clear pattern of correspondence. This is not magic. It is skill. The inner instruments, attention, language, embodied posture, and habitual feeling, are being tuned, and tuned instruments produce music with greater fidelity. You will begin to move through days with a different economy of energy, less wasted reaction, more directed creation. Small confirmations will accumulate into a palpable current that supports bolder choices. Consider the way commitments alter the field. When you make a promise to yourself and follow through consistently, you create a lineage of trust between your present and future selves. That trust changes how decisions land in your life. Completing small tasks, keeping tiny agreements, and honoring micro-deadlines send signals into the world that you are reliable. The universe does not reward inconsistency. It aligns resources toward patterns it can predict. Integrity is energetic currency. Spend it wisely by honoring the little things. Over time, that bank of trust funds larger steps. Pay attention to conversational architecture. The shape of your questions directs the flow of information you receive. Open, curious questions invite depth and possibility. Closed, anxious questions narrow outcomes and provoke defense. Notice the subtle shift when you move from a question that limits into one that opens. The tone softens, the body relaxes, and new pathways appear. Practice framing inquiries that expand your horizon. What is possible here? What would create more space? What small decision aligns with the highest next move? And watch how responses reorganize to provide useful data. The practice of presence is not just a spiritual posture, it is a tactical advantage. When you are fully present, you notice the small openings others miss, a hesitation in a client's voice that allows you to offer a decisive reassurance, the microshift in a colleague that signals interest, the detail in a message that reveals a hidden opportunity. Presence enhances pattern recognition. It also changes the physiological chemistry you emit. Calmer breath, steadier pulse, relaxed expressive tone, which in turn invites collaboration. Treat presence as both a craft and a resource you cultivate intentionally throughout the day. Learn to hold two truths at once. Acknowledge the reality of constraints while refusing to be defined by them. Constraints are the material within which creativity must work. Acknowledging a boundary is not the same as capitulation. When you see a limitation clearly, you can artfully choose a next step that directs available energy toward what is possible. This balanced stance, clear-eyed about what is true and imaginative about what can be, creates momentum without denial. Practice the economy of attention. Modern life offers 1,000 small seductions for your focus. Each surrendered moment of attention compounds into a life shaped by habit. Choose to allocate focus where it yields the greatest return. A deep conversation, a creative task, a relationship that matters, your own inner alignment. Treat attention like a limited resource and steward it with intention. When you do, The field around you begins to reflect those priorities, not by miracle but by the simple logic of energetic reinforcement. Cultivate a vocabulary of aligned action. When you decide, act. Hesitation dissipates signal strength. Decisive, small movement amplifies it. The world responds to momentum. A modest action taken with clarity and follow-through sends a louder message than prolonged planning without movement. This principle is not about reckless speed, it is about breaking inertia with informed, steady steps. Momentum compounds. Once you move in the direction you intend, opportunities that require movement begin to accelerate toward you. Practice micro-resilience. When setbacks occur, treat them as feedback, not final truth. The most skilled creators are not those who never fail, but those who adapt quickly. Small course corrections preserve momentum and prevent runaway discouragement. A brief reflective note, what happened, what I learned, one corrective step, keeps you in the game without losing confidence. Resilient people cultivate a short memory for failure and a long memory for the subtle confirmations that indicate alignment. Tend the inner weather. Emotional storms arise, and your ability to recover quickly is a learned habit. Develop brief rituals that reset you. 3 conscious breaths, a short walk, humming a steady note, touching a small object that brings grounding. These simple resets shorten the time you remain in reactive states and increase the hours you can hold creative attention. Consistency in these small reset practices yields disproportionate returns in clarity and efficacy. Notice the shaping power of small admissions. Admitting a shortcoming, asking for help, or stating uncertainty in an honest, modest way often invites solidarity rather than rejection. Vulnerability, when coupled with dignity and constructive intent, signals trustworthiness. People tend to respond to authentic openings with support rather than exploitation. Use strategic, honest vulnerability to generate connection and resource access. Learn the art of focused generosity. Give what you can in a way that is sustainable and offers real value. A single well-timed resource, a thoughtful introduction, or a practical piece of advice can produce cascading reciprocal returns. Generosity is not the opposite of prudence. Done well, it expands your network and builds a reputation of reliability and contribution. Be generous in ways that align with your strengths and the needs you perceive in others. Cultivate a sound practice of decision hygiene. Decisions that linger erode energetic clarity. Create simple criteria for small choices, align with values, forward motion, and feasibility, and commit to making them promptly. Reserve deeper deliberation for decisions that truly warrant it. Clearing the clutter of postponed choices creates bandwidth for creative thinking and reduces the drag of unresolved potentialities. Practice the paradox of relaxed ambition. Hold a clear aim with steady appetite while cultivating an inner ease that permits flexibility in how outcomes arrive. Relaxed ambition preserves stamina and invites serendipity. It combines hunger with patience, intensity with trust. This twofold posture often produces results that are both substantial and sustainable. Work with the alchemy of small symbolic acts. Small meaningful gestures, lighting a candle before a creative session, writing a brief intention on paper, placing a stone on a desk, create psychological punctuation that signals change to your nervous system. These simple markers do not control outcomes, but they help your body and mind recognize shifts and act from the newly claimed identity. Develop your skill at holding multiple timelines. Powerful creators keep several plausible futures active without clinging to one of them. This multidimensional stance allows for experimentation and flexible movement. When one timeline tightens into a dead end, you can slide into another without the loss of identity that comes from rigid attachment. Practicing this capacity reduces paralysis and increases the agility of your choices. Formalize brief accountability so it functions as support rather than pressure. Choose 1 or 2 trusted people with whom you share a measurable commitment and a short cadence of check-ins. Accountability partnered with compassion produces follow-through. It also offers early feedback when your narrative begins to drift back toward old patterns. Notice how small reframes change social dynamics. When you describe an offer as a collaboration rather than a favor, or frame a request as a mutual opportunity rather than a burden, people respond differently. Words change the arena in which the interaction happens. Learning to reframe is a skill that enhances both negotiation and relationship building. Practice tone matching in conversation. Mirroring a calm pace, quiet breath, and even subtle posture in another person creates immediate rapport and reduces friction. Tone matching is not manipulation. It is a basic social skill that signals empathy and allows smoother exchange of ideas and resources. Keep your commitments visible. A simple list of 3 priorities for the day, placed where you can see it, functions as a compass. Without visible priorities, the mind drifts to what is immediate rather than what is important. Visible commitments anchor attention and guide the small actions that compose larger outcomes. Practice letting go of being right. Defending opinions zealously often costs social capital and narrows possibilities. When you prioritize understanding and shared solutions over the need to be correct, conversations open into creative collaboration. Shifting from proving to exploring changes the quality of what you can co-create. Engage in regular creative play that is unrelated to outcomes. Play replenishes curiosity and loosens stuck patterns. It also exposes you to new combinations of idea and action. The most inventive solutions often emerge when the mind is relaxed and allowed to wander without performance pressure. Use short public commitments to generate energy. Making a small promise in front of one supportive person or a small group leverages social currency without excessive exposure. This social nudge increases the probability of follow-through while remaining manageable. Develop a brief ritual for endings. When you close a project, relationship phase, or an intention cycle, perform a simple act to mark closure. Write a short gratitude note, delete draft files, or place a small object aside. Closure sends a clear signal to your nervous system and to the field that the phase is complete and opens space for new initiation. Practice a daily 3-minute focus ritual. Sit quietly, breathe, notice 5 sensations, and state one clear intention for the next 90 minutes. This micro-practice resets attention and aligns short-term behavior with larger aims. Done daily, it substantially increases the quality of your focus time. Cultivate the capacity to be boringly consistent. While drama and spikes feel exciting, the power of steady, daily alignment multiplies into predictable momentum. Consistency is boring because it is ordinary. Its effect is extraordinary because it accumulates. Treat your life as a laboratory. Test small variables, note outcomes, keep what works, and discard what does not. Adopt the humility of a pragmatic experimenter who is more interested in learning than in defending an identity. This stance reduces ego fatigue and produces faster adaptation. Remember that the field is responsive to sustained, congruent signal more than to sporadic noise. When you commit to a steady pattern of inner and outer practices that align with your intended identity, the world adapts. Perseverance is not stubbornness, it is a refined form of patience married to consistent action. As these practices mature, you will find that you require less external reassurance and more internal calibration. Your confidence will come from accumulated evidence rather than fluctuating moods. This inner proof becomes the stable ground from which you create. As your practices become habitual, you will notice a deeper subtlety in how the world answers you. The responses are no longer merely helpful coincidences. They begin to exhibit a kind of intelligence that matches the tone and clarity of your inner broadcast. When you hold steady attention, when your language is precise, and when your body carries the new identity without effort, reality responds with proportional fidelity. This is the point where creation shifts from occasional novelty to reliable craft. You learn to operate from a place of calibrated expectation rather than hopeful wishing. One way this shows up is in the sharpening of discernment. As your inner field stabilizes, you become better at sensing which opportunities are genuinely aligned and which are seductive distractions. A steady signal reduces the noise of flashy possibilities and reveals paths that conserve energy and amplify momentum. People who have practiced this report fewer false starts and more sustained progress because they have learned to wait for confirmations that match the tone of their intended direction, rather than chasing every bright object that appears. The cultivation of a clean inner environment matters enormously. Just as a radio's performance degrades with static and interference, your capacity to transmit a coherent signal diminishes when you tolerate internal clutter, habitual worry, unresolved resentments, or persistent self-critique. Clear these through small, deliberate acts, a brief practice of forgiveness, a tidy of your space, or a conversation that closes an open loop. Each clearing increases the bandwidth you have for transmitting coherent intention and reduces the chance that your signal will fragment into mixed messages. Your internal timetable for transformation benefits from patience paired with responsiveness. Impatience often produces frantic attempts to force outcomes, which bind energy and produce resistance. When you cultivate patient responsiveness, attending closely to subtle feedback and adapting with small, decisive steps, you create a rhythm where the world begins to coordinate with more ease. This rhythm feels like an internal metronome that guides consistent action without panic and without passivity. Embodied rituals remain essential. Short, repeated actions that integrate body, breath, and intention anchor new states in neural circuitry. These rituals can be as simple as a hand-on heart pause, a slow breath while imagining the next right step, or a morning stance that declares your chosen identity. The point is not theatricality but physiological congruence. When the body matches the mind's claim, the whole system aligns more quickly and the external field follows. Practice the discipline of small, visible experiments. Choose a narrow domain, an email response, a meeting style, a way of greeting colleagues, and test a new inner state for a short window. Observe results and adjust. These bounded tests reduce the anxiety of change and produce clear data. Over time, the accumulation of small experiments refines intuition and trains you to read feedback rapidly. This scientific posture transforms faith into evidence-based practice. Notice how generosity becomes an amplifier of resource. Giving develops networks and opens doors in ways that transactional thinking rarely does. Small, well-placed generosity sends a clear signal about who you are, what you value, and how you operate. It creates reciprocal flows that are often disproportionate to the initial gift. Generosity need not be grand to be catalytic. A thoughtful introduction, a timely compliment, or a practical offer of help often ripples outward with surprising velocity. Learn to steward attention during social exchanges. Conversation is the ground where possibilities are negotiated and co-created. Attend to microsignals, eye contact, tone, a pause that requests elaboration, and respond with presence rather than agenda. When you listen deeply without preparing a comeback, you harvest information that others often miss. Presence turns ordinary interactions into openings for collaboration, information, and resource exchange. Refine the art of making public, short commitments. When used judiciously, a modest public promise increases follow-through because it leverages social currency without excessive exposure. Telling one trusted ally about a small goal creates an energetic nudge to complete it. This practice builds momentum through visible accountability while keeping stakes manageable. Work with the tempo of decision-making. Some choices warrant quick, decisive action, and others deserve reflective pause. Develop personal criteria that separate the two categories. Trivial decisions moved quickly, strategic choices paused and consulted. Clarity in tempo reduces decision fatigue and keeps your energetic signal consistent. Decisive action communicates to the field that you are serious. Measured pause communicates that you are wise. Cultivate a posture of creative curiosity toward setbacks. When outcomes deviate from expectation, treat the event as an intelligent datum rather than evidence of personal failure. Ask, what new information does this provide? What small correction sharpens the next move? This investigative stance converts apparent losses into laboratories for improvement and prevents small setbacks from becoming identity-level judgments. Tune the language you use about effort and outcome. Language that conflates worth with achievement traps energy into cycles of performance and judgment. Choose phrasing that honors both aspiration and intrinsic value. I am committed to learning. I am practicing skill. I am building craft. This language reduces the internal pressure to prove and preserves energy for sustained action. Remember that some shifts require repositioning within networks. Sometimes the inner change calls for a physical or social relocation, a new team, a different neighborhood, or a fresh circle of practice. These moves need not be dramatic. Often a single new weekly meeting, a different co-working spot, or a new class provides the context that matches your elevated frequency and accelerates the translation of inner change into outer results. Tend to the quality of your commitments by making them small enough to deliver and significant enough to matter. Promise what you can reliably fulfill and then over-deliver when possible. Reliability builds reputational equity that the field recognizes. Do not confuse speed with reliability. Steady, consistent delivery often outperforms erratic brilliance. Cultivate an inner process for rapid reorientation. When an event destabilizes you, have a short sequence. Breathe, note one observable fact, choose one next small action that returns you to competency quickly. This habit shortens recovery time and reduces the cognitive drag of lingering disorientation. Practiced reorientation is a form of resilience that keeps your signal clear and your momentum intact. Work with the seasonal and energetic rhythms of your goals. Launch initiatives at times that align with your capacity for engagement. Recognize when a creative cycle is ripe for acceleration and when it requires quiet incubation. Honoring these natural rhythms preserves energy and tends to produce better work with less friction. Practice a daily snapshot of values and actions. Each morning note one word that summarizes the way you intend to move: clarity, generosity, craft, and then choose one action that concretely expresses that value. Keep the practice brief and specific. This connects intention with action and keeps daily choices aligned with larger aims. Develop a habit of offering short, useful feedback to others. Cultivating the capacity to give clear, kind, and actionable observations increases trust and deepens collaboration. People who provide useful feedback are sought after because they contribute to others' forward motion, which often returns as reciprocal support. Lean into modest public vulnerability as a relationship builder. Sharing a brief, honest difficulty paired with a specific request for help invites practical support and dispels isolation. Vulnerability practiced with dignity creates community and often brings resources that solitary striving cannot. Practice a weekly clearing ritual that removes accumulated cognitive clutter. Spend 30 minutes on a Sunday listing open projects, decisions, and pending commitments, then assign a next step to each. This simple clearing creates a sense of order and reduces the background hum of unresolved possibility that drains attention during the week. Cultivate the discipline of precise language when you brief others. Concise, clear requests reduce misunderstandings and increase the likelihood of aligned response. Use one-sentence headers, one clear objective, and one desired next step when communicating plans. Precision in language produces precision in results. Frame constraints as creative prompts rather than limitations. Tight boundaries force inventive solutions and reduce the paralysis of unlimited choice. Constraints simplify decision-making and prime the system for action. Honor small acts of follow-through as sacred. If you promise to read a report, do it. If you say you will call, call. These small follow-throughs accumulate into a strong reputation and a smooth field of cooperative interaction. Patterns of dependability create leverage that larger projects require. Practice a daily micro-affirmation of competency. Choose a phrase that anchors you to your capacity. I adjust quickly, I learn deeply, I follow through, and say it with calm conviction. This low-key ritual stabilizes identity under stress and reduces the amplitude of doubt-driven reaction. Learn to read the subtle shifts in feedback and respond with calibrated incrementalism. Large corrections often cause overcorrection. Incremental shifts allow you to tune finely and reduce oscillation. Think of steering rather than brute force. Small adjustments keep the trajectory steady. Tend your emotional punctuation. Intense highs and lows consume energy and can mask the steady cues that guide skillful action. Practice even-keeled emotional management through breath, movement, and brief reflective pauses. This steadiness improves decision-making and reduces the noise that obscures meaningful signals. Practice gratitude directed at emerging evidence. When a small confirmation appears, an email that lands, a supportive word, acknowledge it specifically and note why it matters in your context. This focused gratitude reinforces the pattern of noticing and draws more confirming events into view. Work with the principle of strategic inconsistency. Occasionally break routine in small, deliberate ways to expose yourself to new contexts and people. These gentle ruptures prevent stagnation and invite novel combinations that can catalyze progress. Cultivate a practical humility that blends confidence with curiosity. Know that you can influence reality and also be open to surprise and correction. This combination keeps your signal strong while allowing for adaptive learning. Practice closing daily with a brief record of one lesson and one next step. This micro-debrief preserves learning, clarifies priorities for the next day, and prevents lingering mental churn. As these capacities mature, you will notice that life requires less effort to hold desired outcomes. The outer world begins to coordinate more fluidly with your inner state because your signal is clearer, your practices more dependable, and your choices more aligned with your future self. Creation becomes less about frantic trying and more about skillful presence. As your practice reaches this stage, the field around you becomes more cooperative and more informative. The events that once felt random now show patterns you can read. These patterns offer actionable intelligence. When an idea recurs in different contexts, it is a prompt to act. When a person keeps appearing at pivotal moments, they may be a gateway. When a number or symbol repeats, it is a signpost. Learn to treat these repetitions as data rather than magic. Catalog them, note the context, and use them to refine your next choices. This habit converts wonder into usable guidance. One of the core shifts at this level is moving from isolated exercises to lifestyle integration. The practices you once scheduled in pockets now become the scaffolding of daily life. Presence, rehearsal, clarity of language, brief ritual pauses, and micro-commitments are woven into routines so seamlessly you stop having to remember them. They become default modes. As this integration happens, the sensitivity of your nervous system increases. You notice subtler tensions and subtler openings. Respond quickly to small cues rather than waiting for large signals. In doing so, you accumulate leverage through nimble adjustments. Cultivate the skill of pattern triangulation. When three independent signals point toward a similar next step, an overheard phrase, a recurring image, and an opportune email, treat the convergence as a high probability indicator and move accordingly. Triangulation reduces false alarms and increases the chance that you are aligning with a real tendency in the field. This method balances receptivity with discriminating action. Practice the discipline of small, visible acts that signal change. If you are shifting identity toward being a person who writes daily, place a notebook in your bag where you used to carry a different habit. If you are moving toward a health identity, keep a water bottle visible and set an alarm for a short walk. These outward signals prime micro-decisions in your environment and make aligned choices easier. Small physical cues anchor the inner shifts. Learn to read relational feedback as currency. People's responses are not only reflections, they are offers of exchange. A pause in a conversation, a spontaneous compliment, or a new invitation can all be treated as social currency. Decide what you will invest in these offers and how they fit your broader direction. Some invitations require immediate acceptance, others are seeds best nurtured. By treating social feedback as investable resource, you become strategic in building networks that reflect your emerging identity. Refine your inner language to become an operating system. Shift habitual phrases to presets that launch aligned behavior. For example, replace "I'll try" with "I will take one clear step." Swap "I'm overwhelmed" with "I will prioritize one next action." These small linguistic edits have outsized effects because language organizes thought and triggers specific motor patterns. Your phrasing becomes the soft programming that governs daily behavior. Practice the art of generous curiosity. When someone disagrees or pushes back, respond with a question that seeks to understand their perspective and the needs beneath it. Curiosity dissolves confrontation into collaborative exploration. It also surfaces hidden resources because people relax and reveal information when they feel heard. Generous curiosity is an advanced social skill that yields both deeper connection and pragmatic advantage. Regularly audit your sources of input. The books, podcasts, conversations, and feeds you consume shape the boundary conditions of possibility available to you. When you change the quality of your input, you widen the set of options your mind can imagine. Curate a small list of high-signal sources and rotate them deliberately. Treat media consumption as a design choice rather than a default habit. Tighten the interface between intuition and action. Intuition is not mystical prophecy. It's rapid pattern recognition informed by experience. Practice acting on small intuitive prompts to build trust. A brief call, an exploratory email, a minor adjustment in a plan. Treat these small tests as training lifts for your intuition. As you respond to more prompts, you refine the calibration and notice which inner signals reliably indicate wise moves. Develop a habit of tidy completion rituals. When you finish a task or project, perform a brief closing gesture. Archive files, send a short summary message, or mark a checkbox in your notebook. These small punctuation acts create closure and free attention for the next project. Without tidy completion, unfinished items linger in the mind as low-level drain. With closure, the system resets and energy returns. Embrace the necessity of modest humility. As your capacity to shape events grows, resist the temptation to overreach or to believe you control outcomes entirely. Keep an attitude of experimental stewardship. Propose, test, observe, and adjust. Humility preserves curiosity and openness, while stewardship maintains agency. This balanced stance sustains long-term efficacy. Practice the dance of invitation and boundary. Invite help when appropriate and decline when necessary. Mastery lies in discerning when an offer aligns and when it distracts. Polite, firm no's conserve bandwidth and signal seriousness about priorities. Graceful refusal is a generous act toward both yourself and others because it prevents diluted commitments and preserves the quality of what you can contribute. Learn to use symbolic markers to pivot states. Small actions that carry meaning, changing a shirt before an important meeting, burning a short piece of paper that lists old limiting beliefs, or rearranging a shelf, help your nervous system register a shift and reduce cognitive friction. These symbolic moves are not superstition. They are practical triggers that align body and mind with new intentions. Use short accountability loops to speed up habit formation. Rather than promising vague goals, identify a precise metric and a short reporting cadence. 3 sentences by Friday, 2 minutes of breathwork each morning reported weekly. Small loops create clear feedback and keep momentum from languishing. Public reporting in a trusted circle amplifies adherence without creating oppressive exposure. Practice the discipline of selective visibility. Choose 1 or 2 aspects of your work to make visible publicly while keeping others private. Selective sharing creates sufficient social pressure for follow-through without surrendering the exploratory space required for creative failure. This balance protects emergent work while leveraging social energy for momentum. Tend the microeconomy of your day. Schedule deep work in blocks, protect them fiercely, and treat shallow tasks as fill-in activity. This structural approach maximizes cognitive output and reduces the friction caused by frequent context switching. Respect the sanctity of deep blocks and defend them with simple barriers: a short note on your door, a scheduled calendar event, or an agreed-upon quiet window for collaborators. Keep a running list of micro-rituals that support state shifts and rotate them seasonally. Some practices are morning-oriented, others afternoon-friendly. Keep the set small and reliable. Having a toolkit of ready rituals prevents reliance on willpower in high-stress moments. Practice the art of patient escalation. When a promising thread appears, an inquiry, a connection, a prototype, develop it through graduated investment. Small tests, then larger pilots, then scaled rollouts. This approach manages risk while preserving optionality and allows you to learn cheaply before committing major resources. Attend to the ethics of influence. As your capacity to shape outcomes grows, let ethical clarity guide your choices. Use influence to expand well-being for yourself and others, to build structures that honor dignity, and to steward resources sustainably. Influence untethered from ethical consideration becomes fragile and ultimately corrosive. Rehearse scenarios of success with details beyond outcome. Imagine not just the trophy but how your daily routine, relationships, and identity adapt when success arrives. This detailed rehearsal helps avoid disorientation when outcomes shift your life and prepares you to steward new degrees of freedom responsibly. Refine your practice of resting as a strategy rather than a reward. Schedule restorative windows before and after intense pushes. Treat rest as infrastructure that sustains high levels of creative investment over the long term. Seasons of rest are part of sustained productivity, not a detour from it. Cultivate an economy of small celebrations. Marking small thresholds increases motivation and signals the system that progress is desired. Create modest rituals of recognition that feel meaningful and avoid turning every small victory into a performance spectacle. Private or small group recognitions often carry deeper resonance. Notice the amplification effect of grouped efforts. When several aligned people coordinate a shared intention or project over a brief sprint, the output often exceeds the sum of individual contributions. Consider assembling small cohorts for concentrated work sprints with clear, short-term deliverables and rotating leadership to harness collective creativity. Practice letting go of the need for constant novelty. Sustainable mastery favors depth over perpetual newness. Focus energy on deepening one or two projects rather than chasing many fresh starts. Depth accumulates social trust and technical competence in ways novelty rarely achieves. Use periodic strategic pauses for perspective. Every few months step back and evaluate the broader direction. Are you moving toward the life you intend? What patterns serve you, and which require pruning? These pauses prevent drift and create intentional course corrections that are more effective than ad hoc reactions. Be deliberate about replenishment rituals that fit your temperament. Time in nature, creative hobbies, social laughter, or quiet reading. Replenishment is not optional. It is the fuel that sustains creative exertion. Personalize these rituals and defend them as non-negotiable parts of your schedule. Practice gratitude toward the process itself, not just the outcomes. Gratitude for the exercises, for the small experiments, and for the daily attendance to inner work, cultivates patience and reduces attachment to specific results. This stance keeps you present and generative regardless of immediate scoreboard changes. As you refine these capacities, you will find that life requires less heroics and more steady craft. The world's responsiveness grows in direct proportion to the clarity and consistency of your inner signal. Become the person whose inner voice issues steady, calibrated commands and whose outward life is the reliable echo. Now you stand at the place where practice meets embodiment, and the seeming gap between inner intent and outer result narrows into practical ease. The last stage of this work is not about discovering new tricks, but about consolidating the capacities you have been cultivating into an operating system for living. Your attention, language, posture, ritual, and relationships have become instruments you can play with intention. The sophistication that emerges here is less dramatic and more reliable. Subtle calibrations produce predictable responses, and your life becomes a laboratory for refined experimentation rather than a battleground of brute will. Notice how time itself begins to feel different. The past no longer feels like a fixed story but as material you can reframe. The future is already present as a field of potential you can step into. The present moment becomes the convergence zone where choice and possibility meet. This triad, reframed past, inhabitable future, responsive present, creates a pliant sphere in which you can act with greater clarity and less friction. The psychological muscles you have built allow you to move across this sphere without drama. When memories arise that once pulled you into old patterns, you now treat them as drafts you can revise. When future fears appear, you bring the future self into the room and allow its perspective to inform smaller, wiser actions now. When the present offers friction, you use reset rituals to regain composure and act from your chosen state. The final refinements are practical and immediate. Keep your rituals short, tightly felt, and reliably repeatable. Aim for practices that fit into real life rather than idealized routines that collapse under pressure. A brief morning centering, a midday presence check of 3 breaths, a nightly note of 1 proof that reality responded to your intention. These small anchors maintain the field without requiring heroic effort. The point is not to perform an endless suite of practices, but to sustain a few that you can carry in any circumstance, ones that return you to coherence quickly. Integration requires steady attention to the microeconomics of your day. Protect your deep work windows and honor them as sacred time. Reduce context switching and guard the channels where your best thinking happens. The quality of your inner signal depends on the quiet spaces you create for it. You can negotiate the world with greater finesse when your attention bandwidth is preserved for essential moves. Build simple barriers against distraction, short scheduled blocks when you will not be interrupted, a visible cue for collaborators that you are in focused mode, and a succinct daily list of 3 priorities that guide your energy. As you hold these capacities, you will find that your social field shifts in both subtle and profound ways. People will align with you more often because your presence transmits steadier signals and predictable behaviors. New relationships will appear that match your frequency and offer resources that were previously hidden. Some old relationships will naturally fall away because they no longer vibrate with your refined state. Neither gain nor loss is moral. Both are indicators of a life reorganizing around new priorities. Treat these transitions with gratitude rather than fear, and allow the field to rearrange without judgment. Ethics becomes increasingly important as your capacity to influence grows. Wield your creative power in ways that respect others and expand shared well-being. Influence that seeks only narrow self-interest tends to produce brittle results. Influence that serves wider circles creates robust and reinforcing systems. When you act, consider consequences beyond immediate gain and cultivate practices that generate sustainable, dignified abundance for yourself and those around you. The long-term health of your projects and relationships depends on integrity. Short-term wins secured through manipulation or neglect tend to unravel. The final layer of mastery is stewardship of both inner and outer resources. Steward your energy like capital. Invest in practices and people that yield high returns and remove leaks that siphon attention without benefit. Steward your time by aligning tasks to natural rhythms and by scaling commitments in a way that sustains momentum. Steward your reputation through reliable delivery on promises, and steward your emotional life through consistent recovery practices that keep your inner weather stable. Stewardship is practical devotion. It is daily attention paid to the upkeep of the systems that allow your life to flow. Continue to practice humility. As you grow more skilled, it becomes tempting to attribute every success to your methodology and to discount the role of context, timing, and other actors. Maintain an attitude of curious humility that recognizes the interplay of many variables and stays open to correction. Humility does not mean self-doubt. It means balance between confidence and curiosity. This stance preserves adaptability and keeps your methods responsive to new data. Celebrate progress without staking your identity on outcomes. Acknowledgements of growth help you build morale and reinforce the habits that create momentum, but avoid turning success into a permanent identity badge that resists further improvement. When you celebrate, do it as a milestone on an ongoing path rather than as a final arrival. This keeps the field dynamic and open to new possibilities. Design a simple ritual for transitions. When you begin a new project, perform a short act that signals initiation. Write a one-paragraph scene of the future, set a small tangible next step, and place a token in view that marks the commitment. When you complete a phase, perform a closing ritual. Note lessons learned, archive materials, and allow a small pause before beginning the next project. These rituals provide psychological punctuation that helps your nervous system track progression and consolidate learning. Lean into collaborative sprints for larger endeavors. Gather a small team for concentrated work bursts with clear, short-term deliverables. Shared focus for a defined period often accelerates progress more reliably than dispersed long-term effort. Rotate leadership roles to harness collective creativity and to prevent single points of fatigue. Collaboration, when done with clear structures and mutual respect, amplifies individual capacity and brings novel resources into play. Maintain an evidence notebook that catalogs the small confirmations that show reality answering you. Return to this record when doubt arises. Over time, it becomes a powerful resource that reduces reactivity and increases resolve. The notebook also functions as a training manual, revealing which practices produced reliable results for you and which need adjustment. Treat it as practical data rather than a devotional relic. Practice periodic, ritualized reflection. Quarterly, step back and ask what patterns have emerged, what identity shifts have deepened, and what practical changes are necessary for sustained growth. These reflections keep your path adaptive and ensure that the practices you maintain remain relevant and efficient. Adaptation is at the heart of long-term mastery. Invite accountability in measured ways. A trusted partner or small group can offer feedback and keep you honest about commitments. Choose accountability with care. It should be supportive and action-oriented rather than punitive. Public accountability works when it is paired with compassion and realistic structures that support follow-through. Cultivate a stance of generous curiosity toward the world. Approach events and people with the question, what is opening here, rather than with a reactive storyline. This posture reduces fear, increases creativity, and often reveals options that strict goal orientation misses. Curiosity expands possibility and invites others to co-create rather than compete. Keep practicing small acts of courage. Risk-taking, when calibrated and practiced in low-stakes contexts, expands the range of actions you feel capable of taking in higher-stakes arenas. Courage is a muscle that grows with use. Incrementally increase the scale of challenges, and you will find that the field adapts in kind, creating opportunities aligned with the larger identity you inhabit. Tend to your resting architecture. Set non-negotiable windows for sleep, play, and slow time. Treat these as vital operational infrastructure rather than optional extras. Replenishment sustains high-frequency operation and prevents the brittleness that comes from relentless striving without recovery. Maintain the balance between discipline and play. Discipline builds the map. Play discovers new terrain. Ensure that your daily life contains both reliable structures and generous space for experimentation. Both are necessary. One anchors progress, the other renews creativity. Return, often, to the simple truth that began this path. Reality is less a blind landscape and more a responsive field. You are not merely subject to events. You are an active participant in their unfolding. This does not absolve you from effort or responsibility. It clarifies where that effort is most effective. Deliberate inner work combined with measured external action becomes a refined craft. When you move from frantic trying to intentional being, the world adjusts to the clarity you emit. Finally, hold the radiant possibility that your life can become a consistent instrument of meaning. When you align attention, language, embodied posture, and steady ritual with ethical intent, your days yield work that matters and relationships that nourish. Your personal evolution becomes a source of service not because you must sacrifice, but because a grounded, creative life naturally flows into contribution. The highest practice is to cultivate a field in which your presence benefits others as much as it nurtures you.